Well, good morning. This morning we have Pastor Ralph and Julie with us, or Pastor Julie. As you know, from all your preaching days, the powerful anointed preaching. We're so glad you guys are here. Can we give them a clap and thank them for... How are you both? Mic test.
We're good.
Yes, very well.
Very well. Now, you guys are my mum and dad, but I'm going to call you Julie and Ralph for the benefit of those watching at home. You're very excited to be at the front, Julie? I mean, this should be easy. I mean, you've got your YouTube channel and everything going on, don't you?
Yes, okay.
Cooking
Let's not talk about it.
Yeah. No, it's really great. So what do you guys do outside of New Heart?
Well, we're retired now, so life is probably a little bit different. We do a lot of walking, gardening, helping with grandchildren, things like that. So it's just a quieter life. It's good.
Yeah.
We endeavour to enjoy one another's company. Endeavour.
Would you say that?
Oh, we get on okay. We have our moments.
So let's talk about when did you guys start coming to New Heart?
7 years ago.
Yeah,
7 years ago.
Yeah.
All right, but it's longer than 7 years ago because you guys actually started what has evolved into New Heart. How long ago did you guys start that?
34 years this December.
34 years this December. So what, 1986?
Yeah, end of 86, yep.
Yeah. And how did it kind of start? How'd you start? You had a family. How big is your family?
We have 6 children. We had 5 when we came because you were still in your mum's tum.
Yeah. That's awkward right now.
Sorry.
Why are you sorry? You brought it up. So you've got 6 children, and why am I the favourite?
You just are.
She didn't deny it. There was no denial there. No, so we've got a family of 5, 6 on the way. What was church like in those really early days?
Very basic because we had one person after about 4 months that actually came from Campbelltown. So it was really the family and then support from other churches that were in the Sydney area that would come out.
Do you remember who the one person was?
Betsy Craig was her name.
Wow. That's incredible. What did you do in the early days to try and get the ball rolling with church, reaching out?
Well, I think we had help from another church in
Hills,
that's right. The Roy and Pam Waters used to bring their fellowship over of an afternoon and service, and then the majority of people would come back and have dinner with us at night time.
Nice.
Sort of grew from there, so we were very thankful for them.
Yeah.
We used kids clubs and met in Ambervale and East Campbelltown.
Yep.
And we started church services in March 1987 in what is now Thomas Riddell High School, but was Ambervale High. It was called Legoland because it was all portable buildings.
Yep. Awesome. Let's go back a bit further because we'll get more back into church a little bit later. What was growing up and what was church like for you guys growing up? So, for example, you're Australian, obviously. Me and Mum are English, and I'm a citizen of England. It's incredible. You both have different stories sort of growing up. What was church like growing up? What was your experiences of God and church growing up?
Well, it was very traditional back when I was a child, and in England we would have 3 services. Like we'd have a morning service, Sunday school in the afternoon, and an evening service. And we went to all of those, and it was just part of our life. We just grew up knowing that was what we did on a Sunday. There was nothing else, you know. You might visit people through the week type of thing, but Sunday was Sunday. It was God's day.
Where in England are you from? Where in England are we from?
I'm from Berkshire in England. Yes.
Berkshire.
Berkshire.
Oh.
Yes.
And you told me that Downton Abbey, where they shot the castle that they live in Downton Abbey, or the building, that's like, was how far away from where you lived?
That was their family home.
I don't know how far away it is.
One of you told me that.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's a bit difficult in distance, but it's not very far. You could cycle there. You could
Yeah.
do it on a
I
plane.
got really excited about that.
Yeah, it's not too far at all.
So yeah, so what was it? Berkshire.
Berkshire.
Berkshire. Okay. Berkshire. Yeah. What about you, Pa?
Yes, always grew up in the church. So as young children, we used to go to Sunday school, and then church, and similar. It was probably 3 services on a Sunday in one way or another.
Yeah.
And then my dad went into the ministry, so then it was our whole life.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. That's a good segue. So your granddad, your dad, Frank, was a minister,
Yes, he was.
and your dad was, what would you class? How would you class him?
A local preacher.
Sorry?
A local preacher.
On call.
Yeah, just filled in for people when needed.
So like a lay pastoral kind of fill-in preacher.
Yeah.
Okay. What how were those experiences? How did that sort of encourage you or challenge you to kind of how you live now? Like watching them, was there anything you took away from that? I know your dad had a big influence, but growing up watching him, did it influence you in any way?
Yes, it did. He was very faithful, and his church and his preaching came before everything else. Any sort of family time was always put a little bit to the side. I mean, he was always there for us. But like he'd come home from work and he'd go in his office and he'd write his sermons and things like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a big part of our lives. We knew nothing better, nothing different.
Yeah. Yeah. What about?
Oh, a big influence, and even as a kid, you know, I can remember in the cubby house, us 3 boys playing church and doing the important things like taking up the offertory and things like that.
Yeah, I can imagine Uncle Rodney taking up the offertory every week.
Yeah, probably getting a bit lighter.
So let's just talk about that for a while. So when did you come out to Australia? What year? You came out twice and went back once, didn't you?
I came out when I was 3.5, and then I went back 3.5 years after that.
Okay.
And then we spent another 3 years in England, and then I came back. So it would have been about 11, the second time when I came back. So I've been here since I was about 11.
And how did you two meet?
We met, our eyes met across a room, and it was everything about our life really involves the church, and it was after church, what we used to call Singspiration. So the youth used to get together and sing choruses, and I looked across that room and I saw the most beautiful eyes I had ever seen. That's
And then when did you see Mum? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
yeah. So
That's
and
nice.
really from that moment on, we yeah.
So met at youth group. Do
Yes.
you remember what youth group it was?
Oh yes. Yeah.
Do you want to share it?
Yeah, Liverpool Methodist.
Liverpool
Youth group.
Methodist? Yeah. Okay, so you met at youth group. You dated for how long?
Well, we met when I was 16, so we got married when I was 19. So,
All right. And then from there, you didn't get into ministry straight away?
No, I had a call on my life, and so I was always involved, and I was preaching from 17 and 18, and I had a call on my life when I was around about 21 that I should go into the ministry.
Yeah.
And my dad, who had come out of the ministry by that, said, Ralph, he said, I will do everything possible to make sure that doesn't happen. And there were a set of circumstances, and it didn't happen. And so it was then a number of years before I then came into the ministry.
So what age did you go to like Bible college?
I went to Bible college, or we went to Bible college when I was about 36.
36. And you came back when you were 40?
Yes, came
Yeah.
here when I was 40.
So let's just talk about that for a second. You guys were both in church, then there was this long stretch where you weren't in church. So what happened there? Why did you walk away from church? Was it busyness? Was it distractions? What was it?
No, I didn't walk away straight away. It was a slow process. Two things happened. One was that my dad actually needed help. Now, whether that was reality or not, I don't know. And I ended up going into business with Dad. And so by profession, I'm an accountant. So we went into business. But at the same time, so it was slow, I was teaching Sunday school, and some of the kids were asking questions that I had never asked.
Yeah.
And so therefore, in that process, and so I gradually drifted away, both in terms of where my beliefs were and also in terms of focusing more on the material than on the spiritual.
Yeah. And Mum, did you, or Julie, did you ever really, you kept going to church, didn't you?
Yes, I kept going to church because that was a promise that I had. It was a promise that I had made my father.
Yeah. And Granddad passed away fairly young, didn't he?
He was 72, which is our age.
So young.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he was 72. He had been sick for a while, but he kept praying for Dad
Yeah. Yeah,
all
that's
the
good.
time. And it wasn't until Dad sort of made the decision that he passed.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to come back a little bit and go forward a little bit. But so you started to move away from the church, come out of the church.
Yep.
It sounds a bit like it was distraction, but also personal choice.
Yep.
Granddad was in the ministry.
Yep.
Obviously, there was a falling out there, which we don't need to really get into, but there was some sort of falling out. Let's just touch on, again, just because I want to touch on the idea of like the example that gets set by an older generation to a younger generation.
Yeah, it's good.
Granddad Howe, I never met Granddad Howe, but I can feel a profound influence of him through brothers and sisters. I constantly ask questions about him because I just wish I knew him to some degree. And I get a bit emotional about him too, but I don't know why. I never met him. And we're focusing on granddads, but we should also focus on grandmas too, because both of them are pretty incredible as well. I just want to try and get to some stuff. So he was a big influence, a big prayer and a big encourager. Granddad Lewis though, Frank Lewis, your dad, he also did some pretty brave stuff in ministry, and I think some of those things need to be recognised because I think it's influential to what we need to be as a church as well. So can we talk about for a second, I believe there was the idea of communion and the fact that Aboriginals weren't allowed to take communion and he refused, is that right?
Yeah. One of his appointments was in a country town, and he had a real desire to reach out to, well, there were a number of social issues, but one of them was to the Aboriginal community. So they wanted to come to church, but there were certain people within the church who said, we don't want them taking communion with us. In fact, we don't really want them coming to church at the same time as we do. And so he resisted that. The influential people were the financial people. They withdrew the support, and it ended up being a statewide inquiry into that situation, which in the end meant that he was moved. But no, Dad was very much that way involved. In fact, he was involved in this particular town of getting housing for them. He arranged to move housing up and build it for them up there. So.
I think it's the reason why I want to highlight that is because I think it's so important that the church is not just about getting people through our doors and building numbers, but we're actually, I mean, that's Jesus right there, isn't it? That idea of everyone is welcome to the table.
Yes, yeah.
There was another story about a van too, wasn't it? He wasn't allowed to...
Well, he wasn't allowed to use, in this particular town, it was an issue, but he wasn't allowed to use the church car to transport Aboriginals. He was directed that wasn't to happen.
And I just think that, we could sort of say, oh, well, times have changed and things are different, but they're really not. It just looks different now to a certain degree. And I just think it's really important that we highlight the fact that the church should be the ones that are breaking down these walls, where those that are on the outer are actually brought into the centre. Because I think that's what Jesus did. And did that I know that story impacted me when you shared that with me. It actually brought a whole new light to who I saw Granddad as. Did that influence you or influence your ministry?
I have a lot of stuff from Dad towards that end. And there's a lot of other things that are common. You know, Dad went into the ministry at 36. He left the tax department, but he maintained his registration. In other words, he maintained the possibility of being able to work in business. When I went in, when it was about 36, I was an accountant, but I did the other. I got rid of all of that, so I could not go back. I burnt the bridges.
Yep.
And because Dad came out and went into business. So there's those kind of things that you learn from, even do it a bit different from the way that they did it.
So Granddad, how? Because I'm trying to bring everyone into the room. He just prayed constantly while you were distant?
Yes, he did, and I'm not sure that I was terribly sympathetic to him, even in those areas of prayer. But he kept praying, and then as I started to come back, he supported me in every way. So I used to preach messages, and after I preached the message, I would always take it to him and show him, and he'd always tell me it was good.
Yep.
But I would take it. It's interesting that right at the end, which was in 1983, I took him the last one, and he wasn't interested, and he died within days of that.
Yeah, wow. So did he know that you guys were on your way to Bible college before he died?
Yes, he did.
Yes, because he had been praying for Ralph, and then Ralph sort of made a decision he wanted to go to college, and I thought, well, that's not on, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in college and Bible school and all that sort of stuff. I was happy to be at home and happy to have a family and happy to support my local church, but to be a minister's wife just wasn't me, you know. And I sort of said it to Dad, and Dad sort of said, look, if you don't support him and let him do what he feels he's called to, he'll never be totally satisfied or happy. So
and then
to college.
Off to college.
Yeah.
So let's just quickly, because there's other stuff I do want to get to, but I don't know, like I find this stuff really helpful. If anyone else finds it really helpful, you just give a nod, because we're not really following our plan. Not at all, because I can see you got your notes all there, and I'm not asking any of those questions. So let's just talk about the other side of it. Grandma Howe, your mum, obviously was one of the first people in the church here.
Yes.
She was very, very supportive even up to the day she passed. I remember when we took over, she would still give regularly here, even though she couldn't come down to church. She didn't want to be there either, it was too noisy. But also, I think sometimes what gets missed as well is the influential part of someone like Grandma Lewis, Nancy. Just for a moment, let's just talk about how they were helpful in starting this place in the beginning.
Well, you almost can't describe how helpful they were, because if you've got one person from here, and then people from other places who are coming here, and they did that. I mean, Grandma Howe, Nora, came out here fairly early and bought a house and lived out here. Interesting that people would be so committed that they would sell their house and then come to a place and minister. And I can look around this room right now and I can see other people who have done that too, who have said, I think this is where God wants us to be, and moved their houses here. But with Nancy, with my mum, she used to live in Liverpool, and she never came out here to live, but she used to come out and help. Not only came to the service, but would come out and help during the week. And so she would catch a bus, catch a train, catch a bus again, to come and help work for the church.
Yeah.
So incredible. And both of those ladies, incredible prayers, absolutely committed to it, and would ask all the time, what can we pray for? I think the greatest influence, though, that Grandma Lewis had on me, or Nancy had on me, was when she went to be with the Lord. The way she did that was just totally incredible.
Yeah.
And allays any of your concerns about that process. in terms of how you can handle it.
Yeah, I remember that. That was ridiculous. Like, I remember coming away. I mean, I think I was 18 when she passed, but I remember that last night I saw her, and it was the happiest I'd seen her in years. And I was like, I felt like going up to her and saying, you do know you're about to die. And she was like, oh, I'm good with it.
Yeah,
Remember, she gave me the biggest wave, and she died that night. It was crazy. But she also taught Sunday school.
Yeah, both of them did.
I was going to say, I seem to remember photos. I don't remember Grandma Howe, Nora doing that, but I do remember Nancy putting up with a lot of us. I think Jack was probably one of her students, probably Ryan as well, to be honest. You were her favourite, yeah. So we've got influential grandparents. Let's now talk about the fact that you guys are not only grandparents, but you're great-grandparents. How many grandchildren do you have?
Got 24 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren.
24 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren. Do you know all their names?
Yes, and their birthdays.
And their birthdays? I mean, with that kind of ratio, you're pretty much close to being more on a birthday than not on a birthday.
Yeah, it's true.
Like, if you just wake up and go, I'll just send a generic happy birthday, you probably hit someone and get it.
No, they all get their individual phone calls.
Of course they do, and their individual happy birthday songs. Why do you, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious with both of you that you believe that, like, the next generation is important, and that, and I mean, really, your ministry now, we didn't establish that at the start, your ministry within New Heart at the moment is to sort of that older generation and looking after those that are probably retirees and things like that. But I know that you both still have a burden to seeing younger people come to church, come to know God, come to follow Jesus. Why do you think that's so important?
It's important because God is, he's trustworthy. And when we work with God, because he's trustworthy, we can be people who can make a difference in our world. So, I mean, we could go all the way through the Bible and look at Jesus' illustration of that, but we believe that young people and all people can be history makers. And it's not dependent upon how gifted they are. It's not dependent upon how big the church is or all of those kind of things. It's their willingness to respond to the call of God and allow him to work through them. And then that love and that compassion will flow. And so, you know, when I look at a young person, I look at a young person who may think, I'm not worth anything. And yet when I look at them, and it doesn't matter who they are, when I look at them, I say, you know what? They can change this world. They can make a difference. They can be a history maker. So that's basically right. And I mean, God's call on, for instance, our life is so strong that in the end I don't have any doubt. That doesn't mean that humanly you don't have those moments, but no, you know, I know what God has wanted me to do from the time I was 21, well, before that even, but to the time that I was 36, to the time now when I'm whatever I am, 73.
Yeah.
So
what made you, because I mean, like we said before, you've been angelic your whole life, never had an issue. Except the one time you told me that you weren't allowed to go to a Bee Gees concert. See, I told you, I'm going to just flesh out everything today. She was not allowed to go to a Bee Gees concert. Her parents said no, and she snuck out and went anyway. And then, yeah, that's right. And you know what? Here's your pen. No, I'm just kidding. That would be a real miracle. And then you lost your wallet.
It wasn't my wallet, it was my mother's.
You stole You've never said that either.
No,
you just told me you lost your wallet. You stole your mum's wallet.
No, it was mum's.
Wow.
And it was a good one because someone had given it to her and it was special and it got stolen and I had to go home and tell her. And then I had to tell her where I was. And yeah. But
you're a rebel.
She still loved me.
Yeah. That's insane. You never told me that part of it.
Well, you don't have to know everything.
Yeah, clearly. But so let's just share the moment that you decided to get at least back into church. It might not be back into ministry, but what was going on in your life at that time when you felt that you needed to go back to church, or that was something was missing?
Yeah, most certainly something was missing, and I'd been in business for around about 10 years and relatively successful. So that the clients that we had were world champions. They were millionaires in those years. There was all that kind of thing, but I looked at life and I said, if this is all that there is, it's not worth it. All I'm doing is eating to live, to work, to eat, to live, to work. And so I decided, because I had experience with God, that I would just lay it all before him. And I can remember to this day and mind you, this is in talk, but my big brown chair that you used to sit in as a kid, I can remember sitting in that chair and saying to God, God, I need to know that you're real. And I had a personal experience with him where I just felt him from the top of my head to my feet, and I felt his love for me, but also for the world. And I said at that particular time, God, I'm yours. I will go back to that time when you called me at 21, and I'll do whatever you want me to do. Yep. Which meant that I was making decisions for the rest of the family as well.
Yeah. And so from that point on, well, maybe not, but did you sell was it that point, or was it a couple of...
No, it took a couple of years, and I first of all had to tell my dad that I could not stay in the business. And that was pretty traumatic at that stage. And then once we decided that we needed to leave, or we needed to free up everything, so we had to sell the business, and I had to sell your mother's, Julie's, car. We basically got everything together so that we had the funds to be able to go to college, because there was no support. It wasn't like some of the denominations where you're supported. We had to cover everything.
Yeah. And it wasn't like online learning, because you had to move to Melbourne.
I had to go to Melbourne, which was a totally different place. And it is different. Well, it was. For those from Melbourne, it's a lovely place. But it was different.
Yeah. Okay, so has there been like a teaching or a Bible story that you were taught when you were young, taught from, Nancy, Nora, Bill, or Frank, that has just stuck with you since this whole time?
I have to think, I'm sorry.
There's many, but one that sticks with me is Joshua, in Joshua chapter 1, where it says, you're going to work for me. And it says in there that every step that you take will be claiming for you. And just on the aside for that, when I bought that one here to Campbelltown, I have walked most of Campbelltown. And as far up to walking at the edge of Ingleburn, door to door, knocking on doors. Yeah. And then it says there that do not turn from the right or the left. Now, I haven't always done that, but that's always been my plan. It says, don't be afraid, be very courageous. And I've tried to live that out. So I guess that is one of the most important. There's many other passages, but that is one that sticks with me.
Yeah. You don't have to if you don't.
No, I sometimes think of Daniel in the lion's den, and I think how he was protected. And I didn't want to go to college. I didn't want to go to Melbourne. I didn't want to leave my mother because she just lost Dad.
Yeah.
So it was really quite hard. But I just believe that God had it all in control. He knows. He has plans for us.
Yeah.
So who am I to argue with them or dispute them? So it's just a matter of listening to what God tells us and do it.
Yeah.
Whether we like it or not.
So clearly, life is not all flatline and beautiful and good. You guys have had moments where it's been great and moments where it hasn't been great. I would imagine that ministry sort of does that as well, because your context is a little bit different to maybe others we've had on this series, where pretty like my whole life anyway was all ministry. Probably more than half your lives now has been all ministry.
It's true.
So let's just put that in light of that context and sort of say, well, what's it like trusting God in the moments where you feel like you're doing everything right? You know what I mean? Like you feel like you're doing everything He's asking you to do, but you're still not breaking through what you think you should break through. How did you get through those times, and what did you rely on?
They were pretty consistent. I don't think you can ever promise anyone a bed of roses, both following Christ or going into ministry. But it started straight away. So as I responded to God's call, or as we responded to God's call, that Genesis 12 says, leave your father, go to a foreign country, and go down there. Well, we went down to Melbourne, and when we went down to Melbourne, we didn't know that Julie was pregnant. And we got down there, and we were way from family, and she lost the baby. And that's pretty traumatic, because we expected that everything would go right. It was pressure everywhere, including the studies that I went to do. But not only that, part of the way through down there, we had a Ford Econovan, and it was our transport. And Julie was driving that, and outside Pentridge Trail, actually, she managed to collect a truck and made quite a lot of damage to the van. But we ended up with a smash repairer who, because of his lifestyle, it took him over 6 months to repair. So in that first year, we went 6 months without our own vehicle. So that's just one of the illustrations, because there are many. That's not to say that following God is not a good thing to do, but when we follow God, we have to recognise that there will be difficult times. It's not that everything is going to go smoothly, and you have to end up with a tenacity and with a real trust in God, and at times they will flag.
Do you feel like, this is completely off the grid, do you feel like when you look back on your life, not that you're dying tomorrow, but who knows, do you feel like your life's been successful? Do you feel like it hasn't? Do you sometimes feel like, what's it all been worth? Do you feel like you would do it again? Where are you on that kind of scale?
I think we've had a really good life. I think we've been very fortunate. I'd do it all again, yes. As someone who didn't want to go to college, it was the best thing we ever did. And I'd do it again.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. My mind just went blank because I had some marvellous words that I was going to share with that. Have there been those difficult times? Yes, and we've talked about some of those. But being in the centre of God's will is good, and now my mind's starting to get it back. I think that I have been as faithful as I have been able to be faithful. And I think that's all we can ever expect to be. And I am confident that when I meet God, that He's going to say, "Well done, you good and faithful servant." And I don't say that proudly. I've done the best, and God loves me, and He will respect that. And so, yeah, would I do it again? Well, if someone asked me to come to Campbelltown now at 73 and do what we did, I'd probably say no. But if you were to ask me to do it again at 36 and I've not known, oh yeah, I'd do it again. Oh, it's been fun.
Yeah.
And I often think about writing a book, but probably never will.
What do you want to, whether it's like if you want to think about it on a level of your grandchildren and great-grandchildren, or if you want to think about it on a level of everyone watching now, which is what I would suggest, is what would you want to, if you could tell them one more, like if this was your last chance on the microphone and you had to tell them one thing about God that you've learnt in the past 30 odd years, what would you share with them right now? You might want a little bit more time on that one, Mum, but if this was your last chance.
I would say that God is faithful, that he is worthy of your trust, that it is worth it because what he does is that he gives you purpose and he gives you meaning in a meaningless world. A world that could be turned upside down like it has been in the last 6 months. Who would have thought that in the last 6 months? But when I really look at it, I say, well, it doesn't matter because God is my friend. And I mean that in an awesome way because he is Almighty God. And that he does have it in control. That you can be a history maker, that you can make a difference, no matter who you are, no matter what your giftedness. So that's what I would say to people, and live it out. It's exciting.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, lost my thought too.
Well, you are 72, so... You are 72, so we can give you guys grace.
Oh, thank you. No, God is faithful and he is there and he does give you a peace that nobody else can give you. And I'd love to think that all the grandchildren do have a relationship with God because there's nothing else. I mean, life is there and you can do everything in life that you want to do, but there's really nothing at the end of it. So there's got to be something. There's got to be someone or something who has created all this beauty, all this beauty and around us and, you know, the love that we feel. There's got to be someone. So learn to get to know him and trust him and love him because he is faithful.
Yeah, we could have called this whole series Not Your Story, but Trust Him, because every single week it's been about trusting him.
Absolutely.
And, you know, me and Ames can sort of testify to that as well. But I think what's important for us, I've got one more question, but I think what's important for us today is to recognise and to thank you guys for building a foundation. Like we talked a few weeks ago about the fact that we want the ceiling of our generation to be the floor of the next generations. You guys built a ceiling for us in this room that has enabled us to have what we've got now. And I think we should be thankful for that and grateful for the fact that you built a shed at the back of your house. I mean, we didn't talk about half the things that I saw you do, which I thought was pure insanity. But I'm also thankful for because that enabled us to get where we are today. And even things like your hospital, like I know sometimes we focus on Ralph and we're like, oh, well, Ralph, because he had the mic. What we don't always focus on is the fact that you would constantly provide food, constantly open your house, constantly let people in while I was bathing. You know, all these kinds of things. It's legit. There's a story where I was in the bath and people just came in to wash their hands. And Mum's like, yeah, it's fine. Mum, I was 16. And
4.
yeah, I was 4 is still a developmental age. I remember the face. So if we could, just my psychiatrist come on up. No, but I think that idea of, you know, us wanting to be a hospitable church is also birthed because you have shown hospitality for so long in your house and things like that. So I think that you should all be commended for that, and you should be thanked for that. And that, I mean, I didn't really want to run this one because I thought, you know, me being your son, it just looks like I'm trying to rub your back. But in reality, we should always be grateful for those that paved ways and for those that sacrificed. We haven't even talked about the 9 bikes you sold and the boat and the cars and the things that I'm cranky about because I was born and it was boring. You know what I mean? But we haven't talked about all this stuff today. But there is huge sacrifices that were made. And like this place as well, like this was seen as such a victory when we got our own building and stuff like that. But that victory only happens because someone slaved away for years to get to that point. Do you get what I'm saying? So I wanted to thank you for that. The question I wanted to ask at the end is, what would you want to be remembered for? If you had, what would you say to people if you had one opportunity? But if you died right now, what would, and I mean there's a high probability of that maybe happening, what would you want to be remembered for? What would you like people to remember you for?
Someone who's loving and caring, but above that, someone who loves God.
No.
That's well said. I've probably already said it, that I have done the best that I was able to do. And I was thinking about it in terms of, because everything that I do, I want to be a servant. And that he was a servant to all. I reckon that would be a pretty good way of putting something on the tombstone. Yeah.
Nice. Well, can we thank them this morning for coming out, sharing some stuff? I have to move over here. Right now everyone's getting a great shot of my backside. I'm going to pray for us, I'm going to pray for you guys as well. So why don't we all just stand as we get ready to do so. We're getting a good shot of the drum kit there. And why don't we bow our heads and pray right now. God, we thank you right now for the fact that we were able to hear from Ralph and Julie this morning. God, we're thankful for the fact that they been honest and open about their lives and about their struggles, but also about their victories. And God, we're thankful that they can look back on their life and that they can see where you've had your hand on them and where many people were involved in who they are today. And God, right now for us as a church, as we get ready to sing and as we get ready to worship, God, I pray right now that all of us would be challenged to a life of trust and to a life of relying on you, and of a life where we try to serve all and love all. And so God, right now I just pray for those in our room right now and those that are watching online, that we would be challenged to your call and to hear what you need us to do. And for some of us, the call could be pack your bags and go to Bible college, pack your bags and leave, or go to a land that you don't know of, or a land that